So we're going to talk about the way organizations can drive improvements in skills and update, what people are paying attention to and making sure people know what's important and so they can adjust how they operate. And this is primarily focused around software engineering and software delivery teams, but it applies in other places, right? And really what's driving this is this increase in complexity. And the complexity is because things we're doing are becoming more complicated, they're more integrated, they're more optimized, we have higher governance and compliance needs, we have data security in the computer side, safety if you were in a physical plant. So there's just like a lot of pieces that go into this, and you're really trying to find ways that people can upskill, or people are paying attention to this beyond just running training classes. The question is, how do you take those training classes and convert them into action and give people a place to go? And in the software world, we're doing this shift left thing. And that really means is we're pushing more and more capability, more and more responsibility to the delivery teams. It's sort of, you build it, you own it, and this extends on into a lot of businesses. And in my case here, I just threw out a couple. So if you have a delivery team, and some of these will apply in other cases, other types of businesses, I guess, or they have their own list. You've got the manager and the product owner, and then you got the team itself. And in software, that's the testers, the application developers, people. And the application developers sometimes come in a couple completely different varieties. And so, I just call that user experience here. They tend to be the UI people that, kind of move their own way, and they have their own best practices, and they have their own things they have to know how to do in the compliance and governance and everything else to make that reliable. And then we've got DevOps, which is basically building and deploying and creating infrastructure, creating code deployments, all that kind of stuff. That's historically had been outside the team, but the Agile movement had moved that into the dev team a long time ago. And yet some people still don't understand what that means. And that's also super deep. And so each one of those I've already called out in blue have their own sort of way of operating and best practice and understanding the subtleties of what they do. And so there's some conflict between everybody on the team needs to be an expert at everything, and everybody on the team should be doing it the most correct way, right? It can be a big burden. And also it depends on where in the bell curve you hire and motivate. And then there's sort of these other subtle pieces that the teams are in software responsible now, and that would be data, data style, data construction, data schemas, protecting the data, distributing the data, making the data available in the right ways with the right access controls on it. That goes into security. And then we have governance, and that might be lineage and data retention. And there's like a million PII, personally identifiable information protection. And then we have the architects who kind of have a bunch of NFRs cross-cutting across this group, and they also have a target vision on what this is going to look like. And so all these people, all these roles basically have a place on the team. And the question is, how do you continue to make the company distribute that information about how you want this to work across the team, and how you make it so that individuals can pick this up, right? And so there are basically 5 ways that I've kind of seen, and 2 of them are the same, but I call them different because, because some places call them something different. So the first one is the company doesn't really do anything. They run automated training, and they just assume people are going to use that training correctly, and we know from a lot of training types that may not be true. And so this is called the smart people will take care of it, and what it really means is nobody in management a lot of times, there's 2 philosophy. One is you just hire really good people, and if they can't make it happen the way you want, you just fire them and hire other people, right? And there's a couple companies that do that. That's the old Jack Welch model, sort of. And there are some big tech companies that do that. And the other one is you just are like, smart people will, take care of this on their own. They'll learn it. We'll give them the training. They'll do the right thing. We're going to expect that to happen. And I've worked at a couple places where we tried this. One worked okay, at least on a couple teams. But it didn't work across the org because the priorities get confused, right? The fact that we expect them to know that they have to do the right thing without a place to go or a lever to have force their management to do that. Because a lot of times teams will want to do the right thing, but maybe they don't have a way to know what it is, or they don't know, like how to get by people that don't see the point in any of those best practices or data governance or data protection or any of those other things. So another one is I'm going to call this centralized technical matter experts. And this is actually the old, all the DBAs are in one room, and if you need anything done with a database, you got to go to them. And so this is a case where you have a central team, and that team is dotted line or a service bureau for others. I'll talk about this in a minute. Next, and they're like standalone, they're isolated, and they got walls around them. And this sort of evolved into what I would call a central practice, and that's matrix to the teams. And basically, this is still a central group, but essentially, the members in that group attend the agile meetings. They attend all the planning, and they are, for all intents and purposes, members of those teams, but they're part of a central group. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. And I've worked a couple places where this has worked really well in testers and in data people, and a couple others, and architects too. I've seen this a couple places where it worked pretty well in architects, and the goal was to create a central understanding of what architecture or data was, and then put those people on the team. And the only hard part there, of course, is sometimes they forget they're from the central group, and they fall in to the pressure on the team. And the advantage of this one is the people that are matrixed onto the team have somebody to defend them, and their decisions that are for the company may be more than just a delivery item. The next two communities, Center of Excellence, Community of Practice, I'm going to claim these are similar. So Center of Excellence a lot of times is, that all the technical matter experts are owned by the teams, and the teams those experts have a dotted relationship where they have regular meetings and provide guidance among themselves, and then they distribute that back. And in a lot of cases, this is self-organizing. It's basically the inversion of the central practice. In the central practice, everybody reported to the center, and they're dotted line out. And in a Center of Excellence or a Community of Practice, in a Center of Excellence, there's actually a leader, and these other people are dotted into the leader rather than work for them. In Community of Practice, this one is kind of a voluntary thing. I call it Center of Excellence. You're required to participate, even though you're on a different team, and you can still make decisions anyway. So, in Community of Practice is sort of the smart people. This is like the bottom sort of. It's great, but you rely on personal effort of a certain core group of people to make it happen. So Center of Excellence has a central leader usually. Actually, you know what? Let's just go look at this. So central practice, I've seen this work really well with testers at a financial regulator and a DevOps group, actually. And the delivery teams were a mess, sort of. Some of them were a mess besides that, deliberately by their bosses. But like this DevOps and I thought DevOps and the test teams were amazing. And really, the testers in this case, I'm going to use testers as an example. There was a central test practice. They went through training. They went through security training. Their reviews were actually done by the central practice, but they sat out with the teams, and they lived with the teams, and they participated. And so they kind of had two bosses, but they could escalate things to the central practice if it was in violation of company policies or just dangerous or a bad idea. And so I've seen a couple places where this worked very well. This is a non-service bureau version, right? The other one was where you had the whole central group that just takes tickets to do their work, and they are not beholden to anybody, and they're more beholden to their group. In this case, people have like dual allegiance. The next one is Center of Excellence or Community of Practice. And really, like I said, Center of Excellence and Community of Practice in my mind are different. So this is really Center of Excellence. In this case, we have a central practice or a center in the center. And those coaches exist as full-time positions, and they hold regular meetings and regular training for the SMEs or the TMEs, technical matter experts, in each of the teams. And the teams have a certain amount of time blocked out just to participate in that Community of Practice or the Center of Excellence, right? And man, that picture's wrong, isn't it? Dang, I'll fix that in the blog. And so you can kind of see this as the inverse of the other one, right? In the other one, people belong in the group and they're dotted line to the team. In this one, they're members of the group and they're dotted line to the coach. And so I like both of these, you know. And so what do you end up with in some cases? I'm going to actually click this one. I apologize for the size, and it only sort of matters. So I've worked a couple places where we had different VPs, and their philosophies were completely different. One of the VPs was, smart people will take care of everything, so I don't have to deal with any of this. The other one actually built communities of practice or centers of excellence, or they used a centralized practice. So in this case, for testers, they had a centralized practice. That's the one on the top. The business owners did the same thing. The product owners were on the team, but they were matrixed onto the teams, and they actually worked for a business owner. And then the developers were sort of the inverse. They oftentimes don't have a central practice. So in their case, they did like a center of excellence. And in this case, it was actually driven by enterprise architecture. So actually UI had a central group, and everybody was dotted onto the team. And then the regular developers were sort of left to fend by themselves, and basically they got regular guidance from architects that were on the enterprise architecture team, and those people came back and disseminated information. But really, it was more in an advisory role in the department, and the team leads could do what they wanted. And then DevOps is sort of cross-cutting thing. So a lot of times you don't have a full-time DevOps person on a developer team, a delivery team. And so in that case, there might be an engineer that is part of a central group, but they're dotted line onto the team for core items and for deeper stuff. And then the engineers take over part of that role. And that, in this case, the department had only had a couple DevOps people, and so they were spread across multiple teams. The same is often true for architects. They don't exist on every team. If you're doing safe, they might extend across an art, or they'd extend across, like a group that does PI planning together. And in this example here, as I said, I worked in a place where we had one VP that believed in all that and had a pretty nice architecture process, and they had a more discipline, but without a lot of the kind of paperwork and overhead of that. And then the other one thought all those extra coordination was overhead, and their people would just take care of it. And so his org, they had a couple more people down on the dev teams because they didn't have those other slots filled, but it also meant that all their teams really didn't communicate and they didn't leverage each other's work. So you can kind of get the feel from this opinion. I actually like a couple of these approaches. I would say, let's see, was there anything else in here? Yeah, the whole fiefdom thing. You really see this in the developer area, in DevOps and in data and in testing. You tend to see a much better organization around this. Developers are often just slapped onto teams and then left to fend for themselves. So centralized TMEs, there's kind of this pendulum thing where we split back and forth between central and not central for things like data, and I don't really care for that. So in my case, the ones I've typically liked were the central practice matrix to the team and the center of excellence, where they were basically matrixed back to the center. And that's it. I hope that's useful, and I'll probably do more deeper on this if people have comments or questions. Have a great day.